Jerome Myles, the five-star receiver in the state of Utah, just named Utah to his top 5 schools and set a commitment date. Could Utah land their highest recruit in program history? And how does the defensive line looking for the Utah Utes this fall? Hint, pretty good. That's what we're going to be talking about on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to this show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show on X at Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's right. You can visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, and we got a fun show today. Got to talk about Jerome Myles naming Utah in his top 5. An awesome defensive line that Utah has assembled for this season. But first, I want to give a special shout out to Alex Smith for being the first ever Utah football player inducted into the Utah Football Ring of Honor. It's going to happen in the game against Southern Utah on August 29th. So because it's such a big honor, wanted to have an Alex to talk about it with today. It's not Alex Smith, but it's my favorite Alex Napoles. Alex, appreciate you coming on and joining me. But first, really quick, we just got to say shout out to Alex Smith. He is the perfect guy to be the first one to go into the Ring of Honor.
Absolutely. Huge shout out. And well-deserved, right? When you talk about probably some of the most successful Utes who've gone on and play at the next level, play in the NFL. Obviously, one of the first names that comes to mind is Alex Smith. Well deserved honor here for the former quarterback. And yeah, man, I'm excited to have him be inducted.
Yeah, very well may be the greatest Utah Ute of all time. So excited to see it. And it's right away. We don't have to wait. Utah's going to have to wait, unfortunately, though, a little bit longer to figure out if they're going to be able to land Jerome Myles. But they got huge news when it was announced they were named to his top 5. And Jerome did set a commitment date too as well. Blair Ungolo, 24/7 Sports, is one of the main recruiting guy who covers a lot of the West Coast and the mountain schools, including the likes of Utah, put out that Myles narrowed it down to Georgia, Ohio State, Texas A&M, USC, and Utah. My first reaction to that was gulp, because Georgia is one of the best teams in the nation. Well, I mean, Utah is competing with 3 of the 10 best programs in the sport, and Texas A&M, who arguably has the deepest pockets from everything that often gets reported. Let's not forget they're paying Jimbo Fisher $75 million over the next few years not to coach their football team. So it's a stiff competition for Utah. But Blair Ungolo also reported he thinks this is coming down to Utah versus Ohio State. And we even saw one of On3's recruiting experts in Steve Wiltfong predict in his crystal ball that Myles is going to land at Utah. Alex, do you think Utah can really land the 5-star wide receiver, Jerome Myles?
It's going to be difficult. You name off Georgia, you name off Ohio State, Texas A&M, USC. They all got some big pool, right, compared to maybe the University of Utah. But I think Utah has its own different pool, is, of course, being the home state team. But Isaac Wilson.
Yep.
Isaac Wilson, I think, will play a major part in that recruitment of Jerome Myles. It's there. It's potentially there for Utah. Obviously, we have to wait till October 30th to find out where Jerome Myles decides to go. But if he decides to pick the state of Utah and the University of Utah, man, what a commitment that would be for the Utes.
Yeah, it'd be absolutely game-changing. I mean, being in a position to land a 5-star wide receiver when Utah hasn't produced. They produce solid NFL receivers, like I think about Tim Patrick, Devon Bailey, both those guys on the Broncos trying to kind of break through, right? But they have not had a wide. You don't look at Utah, maybe their least successful NFL pipeline might be wide receiver, right? Like, yes, I know Steve Smith obviously went through here, but like you look at recently, one of Utah's weakest position groups has been their wide receiver core. It doesn't scare teams as much. You got solid players there, but guys that don't scare people. Jerome Myles is a 5-star for a reason. You're talking about a guy who has all the tangibles, can win at every level, kicked off week 1 of the high school football season with an 80-yard touchdown reception too. So he can do it all. He's a 5-star wide receiver. What else is there to say about his talent? So this would be a monumental get for the University of Utah. And I am really encouraged by those reports that, especially Blair's, both of them are significant, right? Anytime you have an expert locking in, like, hey, I'm just say crystal balling him to Utah, that's a positive sign, because you don't put that out there unless you feel good about it. Because there's anyone who does this like we do, right? Like you do on the Saturday show with KSL Sports, like I do on this show. If we put out a prediction and it doesn't come to fruition, we're going to get a bunch of crap for it. So you're not just throwing something out there to throw out there. There is information you have gathered behind it. Same thing when Blair Ungolo, who's as connected as anyone with this recruiting stuff, right, puts out there that he thinks it's coming down to Ohio State or Utah. I think there's a lot of steam for that too. And Alex, I find it fascinating with the Ohio State versus Utah. This is something we've seen before when we're talking about an elite recruit. We saw this with Clark Phillips. And one of the biggest reasons that I feel like Utah was able to land Clark Phillips is because what did they offer versus Ohio State? Immediate playing time. If Clark went to Ohio State, probably has to sit behind a couple quarterbacks. Maybe plays the year after, but what did he do at Utah? Came in, played right away, and became a star at this university. And there's nothing more valuable than those live in-game reps. And he got a ton of them because he came to Utah and was one of the best players, obviously, because he also wasn't competing with a bunch of 4 and 5 stars too. So that's where when you come to Utah, that you're still competing against stiff competition, but it's different, obviously, than Ohio State, who everyone in that defensive backfield is a 4-star recruit, versus at Utah, you're battling really good and experienced guys. But it is, when you're a 4-star guy, you just have that higher threshold level of talent. And one thing that does give me a lot of hope about Utah landing Jerome Myles, that's been predicted now and reported so strongly, is Jerome Myles is a very good receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of the best receivers to ever come through Ohio State recently. He didn't even really play his freshman season until the Rose Bowl, when Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson opted out of the game. And that was the Rose Bowl against Utah. He had 3 touchdowns against us. We had an early preview about how special he was going to be, but he didn't get to play because of the guys he was behind. I like this Utah receiver room this year, but guys like Damian Alford, Dorian Singer, Money Parks, like I expect all of them to be gone after this year. So that doesn't leave a lot of experience in that room. I think Myles would have a fantastic chance to come in and play right away. And obviously, like you said, Alex, too, team up with his former high school quarterback. I think Utah has a fantastic shot to land him too.
Absolutely. You look at the players who are leaving, you just mentioned them. You look at kind of where that wide receiver room is going to be heading into spring camp in the next season. There's going to be competition, but there's going to be spots available for the taking. There's going to be playing time available for the taking in the upcoming season, and I think that's going to play a huge part in potentially attracting Jerome Myles to come to Utah. You give him the ability to, as a true freshman, get on the field, make an impact, and get his name out there quickly, and become possibly a rising star in the Big 12 as a wide receiver for the Utes.
I think he's got a great chance to be a rising star. He's already setting the high school football world ablaze, once again off to a fantastic start too. So can't wait to see what he's going to do there. And Alex, we got to talk about the D-line in a moment, but you are with KSL Sports Rewind each week. You cover the top Utah high school football players. One of those guys being Helaman Kasuga, who was the one who was replacing Isaac Wilson, and just connected with him on a big touchdown. Kasuga recently named Utah to his top 10, I want to say too. Now he's only going to his junior year too, so a lot of time for all of that to get settled and sorted out too, just as it is with Myles. I mean, we're still over 2 months away from his set commitment date. So a lot of things can change, but I am curious, just week 1 of the high school football season in the books, especially from a Utah recruiting standpoint, what were some of your biggest takeaways from this first week of high school football action in the state?
Biggest takeaways, I think Aaron Dunn is an absolute stud. The recent commitment offensive lineman for the University of Utah is an absolute ball player. I believe he ran over 3 guys on one of the touchdown plays for Spanish Fork. It was, everybody on social media was talking about it. Look, there's a lot of talent in state, man. There's a lot of talent. I mean, you've seen it as well in your work here covering high school football as well. The growth of high school football has really been elevated over the course of the last couple of years, and we're seeing that pay dividends now, where you have teams like Corner, but there's going to be teams like AF. There's going to be teams like Lone Peak, super competitive teams within the state that are going to bring you top tier talent. And Utah, I think, has to do a good job of finding those diamonds in state and getting them in. And we kind of saw that with Aaron Dunn. And so it'll be interesting to see who else emerges as the high school football season continues.
Yeah, Dunn was fantastic. I got a soft spot for Olympus because of the success my brother had there going there. But even I got fired up when I heard about everything Aaron Dunn was doing up there. So can't wait to see Jim Harding get his hands on Dunn and see the player he develops anew. And lots of great players in the state of Utah too. So can't wait to see how the high school football season continues to evolve. And one thing Utah is really well known for, especially the high school football ranks, is elite defensive linemen. And not surprisingly, then Utah's college football team also has some really dang good defensive linemen, many of them who played in the state too, right? Guys like Van Fillinger had a lot of success at Corner Canyon. So I want to talk about how good I expect this defensive line unit to be. There's a chance it could be the strength of this team this fall, which is obviously a big statement with the level I expect them to play at and how good that this team very well could be. So want to talk a little bit more about this Utah football team in one moment. But first, have to talk to you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at Ibotta. Summer is winding down, but that means you still have some time to take that big summer vacation. Have you been dreaming about it but dreading the cost? With Ibotta, you get cash back on all of your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items, from the groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you can earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift card. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers. So you need to join the over 50 million users who already use Ibotta to earn cash back on every time and every purchase they make. Right now, Ibotta is offering listeners $5 just by trying, and you can use the code LOCKEDONCollege with all caps, no spaces when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, to get in on this great offer from our friends at Ibotta. Alex Napoles of KSL Sports still with me here, as now we get to break down one of my favorite position groups on this Utah roster, and it is a dominant defensive line. And I don't use the word dominant lightly. You have to have stats to back up such a claim when you say they're dominant. Well, this is a defensive line that, least we forget, allowed just 81 rushing yards per game last year, or just 3.1 yards per carry. That's one of the best marks in the nation. They were a top 5 run defense, ranking 4th overall a season ago. Defensive line had 36 sacks, ranked inside the top 10 in rush defense, first downs allowed, and third down defense. And yes, Jonah Ellis was a massive loss. Been tearing it up in the preseason. But I think Utah has the guys where I don't think anyone's going to be as good as Jonah Ellis was, I'll say. But man, this is a deep defensive line. And let's start at the defensive end spot, right? When you're talking about Connor O'Toole, to me, you're talking about a guy who has just grown so much from the guy who caught the 2-point conversion against San Diego State all those years ago. He grew so much over the 2022 season. Kyle Whittingham said during fall camp last year that was this team's best pass rusher. I think he has a great chance to break out. He came back from an injury in the final 8 games and had 4.5 sacks, even in just that shortened span coming off an injury too. So O'Toole, we'll talk about the other DNs in the moment, but when you're asking about like breakout players for me, O'Toole is very high on this list. I'd be surprised. Well, it will either be him or Logan Fano, but right now I think that O'Toole is going to be the guy who ends up leading this team in sacks. I just think he's a fantastic pass rusher and run defender as well too. He's grown into an impressive player.
Yeah, look, Connor O'Toole is, like you said, probably the best DN on this team. He's a fantastic pass rusher. I feel like last year maybe we saw a little bit of a restricted O'Toole because we've heard from coaches that he wasn't 100% healthy last year. Mm-hmm. He didn't play 100% healthy. This season, it's a little bit different because this is a guy who is coming into the season 100% healthy, is feeling good, and there is so much high regard for Connor O'Toole within the coaching staff at the University of Utah and within the fans. The fans love Connor O'Toole, and I think Connor O'Toole is going to have such an incredible year.
I absolutely agree. I'm excited to see what he can do, and this Utah team in particular has 3 defensive ends that I absolutely love, because the next guy I want to talk about is Logan Fano. 3.5 sacks in just 5 games, was coming off a season-ending injury last year, ahead of schedule this year, so we're going to get to see him, and his athleticism. He literally had his season-ending injury on a sack last year, too. So, and that was against Oregon State. Like, he was still just rounding into form, like, going to have such a great season, and that injury was just a crusher. So I think his speed as a former 4-star guy is just going to be so devastating for offenses to deal with. Got great feel for the game, great pass rush moves as well, so can't wait to see Fano tear it up. And the last guy I want to mention with this defensive end group, at least for this the second grouping we're talking about, is Van Fillinger. 13.5 sacks over the last 3 years. He's an incredibly reliable run defender. He took a little bit of a step back as a pass rusher last year. If I remember correctly, he was battling a few injuries though too. But when you were talking about those 3 defensive ends as your rotation, because Utah last year after Fano got hurt, the rotation was Ellis, Fillinger, and then O'Toole were kind of the 3 guys they always played. So I expect that to kind of be a 3-guy rotation still. And Paul Fitzgerald, maybe we see him son. I mean, he did have 8 sacks last year at Utah State, right? So an encouraging player there. But those 3 defensive ends I mentioned in particular, I think they're going to terrorize the Big 12 offenses.
They're poised for a big year. And you hit it right on the head with Logan Fano. I think we're just barely seeing the tip of the iceberg as far as the talent and what Logan Fano could bring on that defensive end for Utah. And then unfortunately, season got cut short because of that injury, but now you have these 3 guys all coming into the new year who are healthy, and that we didn't see that much last year because Fillinger was dealing with injury, because O'Toole was dealing with injury, because Fano ended up getting a season cut short. Now they're coming into this year fully healthy, and so it's going to be super awesome to see what this defensive end group can do once you have your 3 top guys healthy.
I'm incredibly excited. Other guys who could contribute, John Henry Daly, Cash Dillon. It's hard for a freshman, but Morgan Scalley was raving about him recently. So I was like, okay, that piqued my interest when the defensive coordinator himself is going to give you a shout out there. And obviously Akana, there's several other players in that room who absolutely can contribute. But so the 3 I mentioned in particular, and Fitzgerald to a lesser extent, because he hasn't done it at the Power 5 level, I feel fantastic about. And this is where I don't want to go on a wrong tangent on this, because we need to talk about an awesome defensive tackle group, but I still see people question why we're so high on this Utah team, as if they were in Utah's position where you had this much returning talent that's had the success that they've had at the collegiate level. If the same people who criticize Utah, if they had what Utah's returning, they would feel the exact same way. That's why I just always think it's so funny when I see people talk about Utah fans being arrogant. And sure, sometimes we get a little arrogant, I guess. I think at times I try not to, but maybe I come off that way. But I just think when you look at the amount of talent this team has, it's just so hard to ignore, Alex, the fact that they're Big 12 favorites for a reason, and everything is on the table for them with this talented roster to make a great run this year.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because Friday we were up at the University of Utah hearing some of the assistant coaches talk. Mm-hmm. And we heard one of the comments that Lewis Powell said, the defensive tackles coach. He says he has to figure out who to put on his travel squad for the year, because the guys that aren't going to be on the travel squad, they're going to make the scout squad, if you will, they're potentially D1 starters. And that's scary. That's how deep this group is. When you look at that Utah defensive line, they're 2-3 deep at just about every position on that D line, and they're great, talented players.
That's a great note. And it's also a fantastic segue, my friend, because let's talk about that defensive tackle group now. Obviously, when you're talking about the Utah defensive tackles, it starts with Junior Tafuna. Over the last 3 years, 77 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. This Utah defense, to me, they're not known as much for having a crazy or interior pass rusher. I think Keanu Tanuvasa is their best interior pass rusher, had 2 sacks last year, 6 tackles for loss overall, but just even as a freshman, like, flashed incredible explosiveness to me at that position. Really good hands. Tafuna, more your traditional, like, I'll just eat up double teams. And all of these defensive tackles we're going to mention, that's what they excel at. That's why their tackles don't pop off the screen. Like, Liki Vaimahi has over 10 tackles in each of the last 3 years, 4.5 sacks as well. Good numbers. The reason that isn't higher is because he's taking on the double team, so that last year, Cole Bishop, Sione Vaki, Lander Barton, Karene Reed can gobble up running backs because Vaimahi's the one who's taken on 2 offensive linemen at one time. Another guy I think is going to have a massive bounce back year, because I still think Junior Tafuna is the best overall D tackle for his ability against the run. Also, most underrated play of Utah's season last year against Oregon when he stripped Bucky Irving, the running back himself, and created that fumble. That was one of the best plays I've seen in a long time, and I just felt like it didn't get a lot of hype because obviously the game didn't end up in Utah's fortune, but it's rare you see a player be able to do that. The only other guy off the top of my head I've seen do that recently was Aaron Donald. So Junior Tafuna and Aaron Donald in the same sentence for a play is insane. But Tanu Voss also incredibly explosive. The number one guy I think people have forgotten about for this Utah D-line is Samote Pepa. Was injured last year, never the same when he came back. In 22, he had 4 sacks, really broke on the scene late in the season, was really key in some of Utah's efforts to contain Caleb Williams because he's also a really good pass rusher, just a mountain of a man who can overpower guys extremely. So those are the top 4, I feel like. We didn't even get a chance to really talk about how good David Fotu was whenever called upon to, Alex. So this defensive tackle group is incredible. Several guys who, I mean, the fact that Vaimahi, Pepa, and Fotu are backups probably, that's unreal. They would be starters on most other teams in the country. This is easily one of the best defensive tackle groups in the nation to me.
Again, you hit it right on the head, man. It's the amount of depth that this team has on the D-line at the D tackle position. It's incredible. It's awesome to see. And it's kind of reassuring at the same time too, because if, I hope not, but if one of them does end up having to deal with an injury, if one of them does go down for a couple of games, you have the confidence that the next guy is going to step up, and you're not going to miss a step. You're not going to miss a beat on the D line, because not only do they have the talent, but they have the IQ and the awareness to continue to do what Scally and that defense wants to do, and of course that's be aggressive. That's put the pressure on the quarterback, whatever it is. You have that confidence to have your guys rotate in, and you're not going to miss a step. Like I said, they're going to come in, they're going to do exactly what the starters do, because that's how deep and talented that group is for Utah.
The depth that Utah has at defensive tackle, defensive end, and I'll say tight end in particular, and wide receiver really good too. A couple other spots where I think they're really good, but those 3 in particular, DND, tackle, tight end, it's literally among the best in the nation to me. I just don't think these guys the backups would start at a lot of Power 4 schools to me. So Utah is very fortunate to have such great depth there, and I do believe this is the best defensive line in the Big 12. I think it is one of the 5 best in all of college football when you look at the totality of the depth. I understand there's not a first-round pass rusher they have, but I do think Connor O'Toole is capable of being a guy who is Connor O'Toole and Logan Fano's ceiling to me is a guy who is taken in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft come 2025, which is also what Jonah Ellis just did too. So incredibly excited to see this Utah defensive line get to work. And we are almost to the season. So it's time to make some bold predictions. And that's what Alex Napoles is going to be doing, dropping his bold prediction for this Utah football season in one moment. But first, we have to talk about our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel here, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube TV. That's right. 3-week free trial for all the glorious NFL action. That's what FanDuel is here for you. You don't why just bet on the games now when you can bet on them and get to watch them with this 3 free week trial. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. So if you're excited for the college football season, you can sign up and head over to FanDuel to make your bets there. And especially in this offer, if you're fired up for some NFL season, make some bets, and why not capitalize on it with 3 free weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket. So just go to fanduel.com/lockedon, capital LNO, and the O is capitalized in on. So at capital L for locked, O for on, and then that is no spaces. So locked on, those 2 capitalizations, to download America's #1 sportsbook. Once again, fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook and get in on this offer for NFL Sunday Ticket today. Alex Napoles closing it out with me. I texted you earlier today, my friend. I want a bold prediction for the 2024 Utah football season. What have you brought me?
I have been racking my brain about all day to try to figure out what would be a bold prediction for this Utah team. And I came to the conclusion that it's a little hard to come up with a bold prediction when the expectation is already so high for a Utah team. So I think my bold prediction, we'll keep it a little bit simple. I think Utah goes into Stillwater and steals a win from Oklahoma State. That is my bold prediction of the year. Oklahoma State, they are great, and they're probably going to be the team that meets Utah in the Big 12 championship. But I do think Utah goes to Stillwater and steals a win. Make some noise in the first game of the Big 12.
Yeah, I've talked about it a lot. I just really, this is to me is a matchup thing. When you look at who Utah has lost to in the past on the road, they've lost because usually it's great quarterback play that gets them. Bo Nix, Anthony Richardson. I look at Dorian Thompson-Robinson, what he did to Utah, right? Like these dynamic signal callers. Michael Penix last year that diced Utah up. Alan Bowman is not that guy, simply put. And their guy is obviously Ollie Gordon. Utah excels at stopping the run. This is the top 5 running defense. I'm a broken record. That the only player they do not return is their top pass rusher. He's really dang good, but they have the players in place to replace him, and their run defense did not fall off at all when he wasn't there in the bowl game. And now those guys have had even more time to adjust and acclimate. So I think Utah's ready for that matchup. I do not think it's one that favors the Cowboys in Stillwater. And man, I would love for Utah to really put the Big 12 on notice, because the media is given their respect, but I still see so many people who disagree with this team being preseason favorite. And that's fine. If you want to say Oklahoma State, Kansas, whoever, if you want to say someone else favorite, that's fine. But to act like it's ridiculous is where I really hope that Utah can make those people saying it's ridiculous look ridiculous in the end with a big statement game in Stillwater. So I love it, Alex. Hope it plays out that way. Really appreciate you stopping by, because you are incredibly busy, my friend. Tell everyone about what you got going on.
So the high school football season obviously just started up. So we will be doing high school football every Friday from here on out through the month of November, right before Thanksgiving weekend, taking you right up to the state championship games with the KSL Sports Rewind. A lot of things going on over at KSL as well. So make sure to go follow at Napoles Alex there for all the latest Utah sports news. And yeah, man, like super excited that football is back.
Make sure you guys check him out on the Saturday show as well. Alex, really appreciate you stopping by here. High school football's back, and we are less than 10 days away from Utah football being back to when Alex Smith gets inducted. It's going to be fantastic. Can't wait to watch it all play out. Alex, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man. It's always a pleasure and always a great time to be here.
It's always a great day to be a Ute, and can't wait for the season to arrive. If you guys want more Utah football, keep it here. If you're in the market for a second listen, though, Drake Tolles, you covered Locked On Big 12. I was on his show recently, talked about my frustrations with people who say Utah isn't a physical team, and then also had a great opportunity to talk with Spencer McLaughlin not too long ago. Locked On College Football has everything covered on the sport we all know and love. Lots of places to get your second listen in, but we thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen. That's going to do it for us today. We'll be back with you tomorrow previewing another position group on Locked On Utes. We'll see you then.